Hello dear chess fans, my name is Eugene Grinis. Welcome to my free chess school, from beginners to advanced, open for everyone who want to improve own game. This video is intended for the beginners. No game is lost without a mistake being made, be it a blunder or a slight inaccuracy, an error in the calculation of variation, or in the assessment of a position. In this video we will be dealing with mistakes which are committed in the initial stages of a game. We will dwell on errors which involve a breaking of the basic principles of opening play. Our attention will be mainly devoted to typical tactical mistakes and their consequences. There are some practical opening rules for beginners, which are usually worth remembering. These rules are: 1. Open with either the e-pawn or the d-pawn. 2. Wherever possible, make a good developing move which threatens something. 3. Develop knights before bishops. 4. Pick the most suitable square for a piece and develop it there once and for all. 5. Make 1 or 2 pawn moves in the opening, not more. 6. Do not bring your queen out early. 7. Castle as soon as possible, preferably on the king's side. 8. Play to get control of the center. 9. Always try to maintain at least one pawn in the center. 10. Do not sacrifice without a clear reason. 11. Complete your development before you attack. 12. Pay attention to your opponent's moves. 13. Avoid exchanging bishops for knights. And rule number 14. Fight for space. Now let's take a look at the following game: d4, d5, c4, attacking black's center, pawn takes pawn on c4. What is the name of this opening? This opening is called Queen's Gambit Accepted. e3, attacking c4 pawn with the bishop and trying to win this pawn back. b5, defending the c4 pawn, but this is not a good idea. a4, attacking the b5 pawn. This is a trap. Black plays c6. It seems that black is okay here. a6 was no good. After pawn takes pawn on b5, black's a6 pawn is pinned by white's rook and cannot capture the b5 pawn. For example, after e6, white takes the c4 pawn with the bishop and is a pawn up. Let's go back to the game. c6 was played. White takes the b5 pawn, and black recaptures on b5. Now white can win material. Can you find white's best move in this position? Please pause the video. White plays queen to f3. White traps the black rook in the corner along the opened long diagonal. The best possibility for black now is knight to c6, giving up a piece. Queen takes knight on c6 check, bishop d7. White has a knight for a pawn and a winning position. Try to remember this well-known trap. Once more, the whole game. d4, d5, c4, pawn takes pawn, e3, b5, a4, c6, pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn on b5, queen f3, knight c6, queen takes knight check, bishop d7, and white wins. Now let's take a look at the next game. e4, d6, d4, knight to d7. This is not a good move. Bishop c4, developing the bishop on the strong diagonal. g6. This is not a good move in this position. Knight f3, developing the knight. Bishop g7. This logical move is a huge mistake. Why? Can you find white's best move in this position? Please pause the video. White sacrifices a bishop. Bishop takes pawn on f7 check. Black didn't recognize white's idea and took the bishop on f7. Do you know why white gave up his bishop? Can you find how he played in this position? Please pause the video. Knight g5 check. Black king has 3 legal moves. Black plays king to f6. What do you think? Is it good for black? Can you find mate in 1 in this position? Please pause the video. queen f3 is a checkmate. Let's go back to this position. Knight g5 check. If black plays king to e8 here, can you find a winning move for white in this position? Please pause the video. Knight to e6 traps the queen on d8. White is winning. And if black plays king to f8, can you find a winning move for white now? Please pause the video. Knight e6 check with a double attack on black's king and queen. After king e8, knight takes queen, king takes knight on d8, white wins due to his material advantage. Let's go back to this position. Knight f3. It was better for black to play here knight to b6, attacking the bishop on c4. Bishop b3, and only now bishop to g7, with a better position for white. Once more, the whole game. e4, d6, d4, knight d7, bishop c4, g6, knight f3, bishop g7, bishop takes pawn on f7 check, king takes bishop, knight g5 check, king f6, queen f3, mate. Now let's take a look at the next game. e4, e5, knight f3, developing the knight and attacking the e5 pawn. Knight c6, developing the knight. Bishop c4, developing the bishop. Knight to d4. The second move by the knight in the opening cannot be good, but it is a trap, and white falls into it. Knight takes pawn on e5. Better was simple castles, with a better position for white. Knight takes pawn on e5 was played. Queen to g5. Knight takes pawn on f7. Trying to win the rook on h8. Better was bishop takes f7 check, king d8, castles, queen takes knight on e5 with a complicated position. Let's go back to the game. Knight takes pawn was played. Queen takes pawn on g2, attacking the rook on h1. Rook f1. Queen takes pawn on e4, check. Bishop e2 was played. Now, can you find mate in 1 in this position? Please pause the video. Knight f3, checkmate. A smothered mate. The knight cannot be taken by the bishop since the bishop is pinned. Let's go back to queen takes pawn on e4, check. If queen e2, then simply knight takes queen, winning the queen. For example, knight takes rook on h8. Can you find mate in 2 in this position? Please pause the video. Knight c3, check. Bishop e2, the only move. Queen takes bishop, checkmate. Once more, the whole game. e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, knight d4, knight takes pawn, queen g5, knight takes pawn on f7, queen takes pawn on g2, rook f1, queen takes pawn on e4, check, bishop to e2, knight f3, checkmate. A smothered mate. Now let's take a look at the following master game, played in 1890 in Germany. e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, d4. This opening is called Scotch Game. Pawn takes pawn on d4, knight takes on d4, bishop c5, developing the bishop and attacking the knight on d4. Bishop e3, developing the bishop and defending the knight. Queen f6, attacking the knight. c3, knight g to e7, developing the knight. Knight to c2, bishop b6, knight d2, developing the knight. Black castles, bishop e2, developing the bishop. d5, white castles. Pawn takes pawn on e4. Bishop takes bishop on b6. Pawn takes bishop. Knight takes pawn on e4, attacking the queen. Queen to g6, attacking the knight on e4. Knight g3. Rook d8, developing the rook and attacking the white's queen. Queen to c1. Bishop e6, developing the bishop and attacking the a2 pawn. White plays f4, ignoring the threat. Knight f5. Knight takes knight. Bishop takes knight on f5, attacking the knight on c2. Knight to a3. Bishop e4, threatening mate in 1. Bishop f3. This position is even. Bishop to d3, attacking the rook on f1. Rook e1. h5. Queen e3. h4. Rook a to d1, developing the rook to the open file. h3. Bishop takes knight on c6. Pawn takes bishop. Queen takes pawn on h3, winning a pawn. b5. Black has a certain compensation for the pawn due to his strong bishop on d3. Queen f3. c5. This is a huge mistake. Now, can you find the winning move for white in this position? Please pause the video. White plays rook takes bishop on d3, sacrificing the exchange. But what is white's idea? If black recaptures with the rook, rook takes on d3, then can you find white's answer? Please pause the video. Black's other rook is now hanging on a8 after the long diagonal has been opened. Queen takes rook on a8, check. King h7. White has an extra knight, and the best way to realize the material advantage in such positions is to trade queens. Queen to e4 is the best continuation. Queen takes queen. Rook takes queen on e4. For example, rook d1 check, king f2, rook d2 check, trying to win the b2 pawn. But rook e2 with the winning position for white. Let's go back to the game. Rook takes bishop on d3. Queen takes rook on d3. It seems that black is better now. He has a rook for the knight. Can you find the next move for white in this position? Please pause the video. White plays rook e8 check. In this position, black actually resigned. If he takes the rook on e8 with the rook, white takes black's queen on d3, which is now undefended. And white has an extra knight. And if black goes to h7, then can you find mate in 1 in this position? Please pause the video. Queen h5, checkmate. Now let's take a look at the next master game, played in 1969. c4. This is an English opening. e6. Knight f3, developing the knight. Knight f6. b3. Bishop e7, developing the bishop. Bishop to b2, developing the bishop to a long diagonal. This is called fianchetto. Black castles, e3, d5, d4, b6, bishop d3, developing the bishop to an active position. Bishop b7, developing the bishop to a long diagonal. White castles. Knight b to d7, developing the knight. Knight b to d2, developing the knight. c5, attacking white's center. In this almost symmetrical position, white has a slightly better position. His bishop on d3 is more active than the opposite one. Queen to e2. White has a good square for his queen. Knight to e4. Establishing the knight on the central square. This is called an outpost. Rook a to c1, developing the rook. Rook c8. Rook f1 to d1. White has finished his development. Queen to c7. Unfortunately, black has no better square for the queen. thanks to the bishop standing on e7. Pawn takes pawn on d5. Pawn takes on d5. Pawn takes pawn on c5. Pawn takes on c5. Now black has two hanging pawns that can become weak. White has a slightly better position. Knight to d4. The knight cannot be taken by the pawn since it is pinned by the rook. Queen to e5. Covering the f5 square, escaping the pin on c file, and pinning the knight on d4. This looks good for black, but this move is a mistake. Black didn't see white's answer. It is not easy, but can you find white's next move? Please pause the video. White plays knight to c6. The black queen is attacked twice. If black takes bishop on b2 with the queen, then knight takes bishop check with a fork. King to h8, knight takes rook on c8 with a winning position for white. Let's go back to the game. Knight c6 was played. Queen e6. Knight takes bishop check, exchanging knight for good bishop. Now white has two bishops. Queen takes knight on e7. Now follows bishop takes knight on e4. It looks illogical to trade bishop for knight, but it opens the d file. The bishop has to be taken. Pawn takes bishop. Knight to c4, threatening knight to d6. Bishop a6, pinning the knight on c4. But white has a strong answer. It is difficult, but can you find white's next move? Please pause the video. White plays bishop takes pawn on g7, sacrificing the bishop. King takes bishop. But what is white's idea? Can you find white's next move? Please pause the video. Queen g4 check, with a double attack on king and knight. King h8. Rook takes knight on d7, winning a pawn and attacking the queen. f5, attacking the queen with a pawn. Queen takes pawn on f5, winning the second pawn. Rook takes queen on f5. Rook takes queen on e7. Bishop takes knight on c4. Rook takes bishop. Rook d8, threatening mate in 1. But white saw g4, attacking the rook and making luft for the king. In this position, black actually resigned. It could follow rook to g5, attacking the g4 pawn. Rook c4 takes pawn on d4 with a winning endgame for white. Okay, that's the lesson for today from the Eugene Grinis chess school. I hope it was useful and you enjoyed it. If so, push likes, subscribe to my YouTube channel and leave comments. Thanks for donations to my YouTube channel. You can find corresponding links in video description. And the last question for today. Did you find an Easter egg in this video? It is all about viewing the video online, on YouTube or Facebook. Only then it is possible to open the description and to look in it for Easter egg. It is also possible to look what new appears in the last 10 seconds of the video, paying attention to Easter egg. Goodbye.